So it's really a very much of a community-based thing where parents of normal developing kids need to introduce empathy towards children with disabilities, because it's important for the child with disabilities to understand and feel that they are still a person, right? They should be.
Awekenge, this is Mental Metals, hosted by Asego Toto.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, Asego Dodo. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
Why did you write your book? Why did you write your book, Take Down and Sabotage?
I wrote this book mainly to create a greater outreach and impact on the world. I wanted to, be able to teach parents and make an impact on other children. But I'm just one person, right? But if I create a book that is able to help duplicate strategies easily with parents, with caregivers, with educators, with other speech therapists and speech therapy assistants, it's going to create this ripple effect and hopefully be able to reach children and impact children around the world even. So to create greater impact is why I wrote it.
And something that actually I want to touch on within this, in a way, I've seen how policies are actually implemented in a way, and I've seen here in institutional, and also in the national level here in South Africa, and they, in a way, it doesn't favor special kids, special needs kids, in a way, people who have disabilities, and how you spoke about in terms of awareness, in terms of creating this book as some kind of a tool in a way of people that can learn. How has advocacy in a way have helped in terms of trying to create that awareness about what actually children with special needs need within their lives, in their school system? How has advocacy in terms of when you're trying to catch about it? Because I know for myself, talking about mental health is quite hard because people are not easily listening to what you're saying. They are not easily in terms of they take you as a fool and think that they have this perception that when we advocate for something greater than us, that we are free. So what has been, I would say, your feedback towards people? Yeah.
So how has advocacy helped with students getting their needs met? As a parent of a special needs child, I was a speech therapist before I had my son. And so I worked in the school system for 8 years between Hawaii and Los Angeles. And I know IEPs. I know the individualized education plan and what services a child should need. But when it came to the point where my son needed speech therapy or special education in general in the school system, I felt like as a parent, the school system was trying to short me. And I actually had to reach out for an advocate for my son in order to get the services that he needed and he deserved. So advocacy helps with getting the services that the child needs rather than what the school feels that they can provide or they don't need to provide for the child. Because there's so many, students who need specialized attention in certain areas. And the school district either doesn't have the resources to provide that, or they're so inundated with so many children that need services that they're kind of shorting the kids the services that they're eligible for and not providing whatever they need. So advocacy is very important, and educating parents. Now I come across parents who are going through special education process, and I say, I can be an advocate for you, not a technical advocate, but I can lead you towards like what kind of goals or what's the process. But for them to reach out to an actual advocate is really important in order for you to get the services your child needs.
You kept mentioning in terms of reaching for an advocate. Can you actually elaborate on more on people who are unaware of what is an advocate?
An advocate is somebody who, as far as like the special education system goes, an advocate is somebody who knows the laws of the individualized education plan and special education system, because they are federal laws. Every child is entitled to a fair and appropriate public education. It doesn't matter what their disability or intelligence is. The schools are required to provide the services that meet that child where they are performing at. And an advocate is somebody who can lead the parents and the rest of the team in the process of what the child is eligible for, as far as what the scoring system is. The child is tested, right? So the child is tested in the school system to see if they meet certain requirements to get certain services, whether it be speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, academic assistance as well. And the advocate is there to make sure that the school is following the law, and they're also there to help the parents, guide the parents through that process, because the parents don't know anything, right? They're not educated on this process. It's very abstract to them. They don't know the nuances of it. And so the school system, I feel, has gotten away quite a bit with brushing things along and not paying attention to the details that every child needs. And if the parents aren't educated by an advocate or somebody else that is highly knowledgeable about the process, then the parents just are left, they're just left dumbfounded often, saying, well, I think my child needs a service, but they're not going to provide it, so I'm not sure what to do. But if they have an advocate person in their corner, that person can lead them through the process and hopefully get them the services that the child needs.
And again, you back what you've said in terms of you yourself were in a way you're pushed to a corner of being able to reach into to an advocate. Can you walk us through on how was that process? How did it take mentally in terms of you, in terms of trying to? Definitely was frustrated in terms of the school system, and definitely I know that probably from my point of view of seeing the outside, from the outside point of view of seeing that when it comes to disability, people make it hard even though things are not hard. So how did that feel, and how was the process or the process?
So when a child is between 0 to 3 years old, they get early intervention services by whatever their state program is. So ours in Los Angeles is a regional center. And so they get, if a child is delayed in certain areas, they get their services through the regional center. And as they're transitioning from 0 to 3 to 3 to and up, which is school age, then the department of whatever they're getting their services from, it transitions them into the school district. So the school district then tests the child. It's supposed to be a comprehensive test to see if the child qualifies for continued services in the school. So the process really starts in early intervention. And that's what my book focuses on, is children who are between 0 and 3 years old, learning how to use language and be introduced to language. And then, if they still require services after 3, then they move on to school age and see if they would qualify for the preschool special education program, and so on and so forth, going through elementary, middle school through high school. So the process, if you see your child is delayed in some way, your pediatrician can refer you over to your local agency or institution that will provide early intervention services. If you happen to not notice your child needed services between 0 and 3, you can reach out to your local school or school district and get your child tested comprehensively in order to see if they qualify at that point there. And if you're unhappy with, the outcome of the meeting, that's when you really need to reach out to an advocate or somebody who can look at your assessments, look at the meeting notes, and see if the school had not met your child's needs, and if there's more that can be done to help your child.
And when it comes to this conversation around, so in terms of assisting children with special needs, it's quite, as I've said, it's quite a conversation that people are ignorant to have. It's a conversation that people think that they are not part of. How to make sure that you actually bring that awareness around people to the community that you are in terms of trying to actually involve them in the activities?
Yeah, I think having a child with special needs really gives me a perspective of someone from the inside looking out, right? So before I had my son, and before he had his accident where he had a brain injury and stroke, I was a provider. I was a service provider, and I understood special education from a certain point of view. And now that I'm a parent, I can have a full circle view of what it takes to make this child with a disability whole, right? So you have community involvement. Like my son goes to the YMCA, and they really include him in all of the sports that they have. He does basketball. He was doing taekwondo there. Inclusion in the school system is very important. We switched from a special education classroom where he was only in a classroom with special education students to a regular mainstream classroom where he is included in the daily classroom with other children his age, with normal developing peers, where he can learn social interaction. So I think it is really important for everyone who, comes into contact with children in general to create empathy. There are normal developing children who do not understand that children with special needs are a certain way, right? They get teased. Normal developing kids often tease kids with special education needs because they don't understand it. And they're like, why is this person different than me? So it's really a very much of a community-based thing where parents of normal developing kids need to introduce empathy towards children with disabilities, because it's important for the child with disabilities to understand and feel that they are still a person, right? They have feelings too, that they can be accepted by and included in groups of children their age who may not be exactly like them. So I think it's really important for everyone to be aware of children with special needs, because you are going to come across a child or an adult with special needs, and it's really important to have empathy for them and to think about a different perspective. What if this was your brother or sister or your child, right? And I think that unless you are taught that as a child growing up, you don't have that point of view where you can relate to somebody who is different and accept them and be patient with them.
Mm. And I just want to go back to something that you said, and also said such important things in terms of switching yourself into a regular cluster. And I feel like it's something that people who actually don't understand children with special needs actually don't want to treat as special, but treat it as normal as the other kids. And being able to actually box a child in terms of putting them in a classroom that is in that's limited, that limits themselves and limit their beliefs. And the reason why I am bringing that up is the fact that I know one of our students, he is blind, and one thing that I realized about him is the fact that he wants to do everything by himself, not being able to actually, in terms of everyone doing or everything for him. Because with that, I believe that if you do everything for that certain person, they would actually won't able to actually really explore life. They would actually not actually know what should I do, what I'm not supposed to do, because they will be dependent on you. And when you are no longer there, who will actually have that kindness enough that you had towards them? It's something that I feel like one of the misconceptions. Speaking of a misconception, through your work of advocacy, what have you had come across when it comes to misconceptions around special needs kids and what services they need?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many misconceptions about children with special needs, right? They're limited, that they're not smart, that they can't do anything. But, every person has their strengths. Every person has their passion. Like my son loves to dance and play music, and he has his own sense of humor. And to think or to have your idea of a person to be limited is such a disservice to that person and also to yourself in a way, because you are closed-minded if you are thinking that person is limited. And I agree about, your student that is blind. It's like if he is catered to, then he is going to be dependent on everybody, and he will continue to be a dependent. But if he is able to explore his world and do it in a safe manner, then he will become, more independent. He's still going to need some assistance, right? Because there's going to be situations where it's going to be unfamiliar to him and maybe unsafe. So he will need probably somebody to kind of make sure that he is safe. I think that's the biggest thing, is to let them explore, but be safe. And the same goes with my son too. He had a stroke and a brain injury, so he doesn't use his right arm or hand. He only sees 50% of his peripheral, and he has some balance issues and coordination issues. But letting him explore like a play structure and climbing, that was a big thing where he needed so much assistance. But as the years go by and he's going up the same play structure, little by little we can back off, and we don't need to be right on him. We can be near him to keep him safe. But as a parent, it's like that. It's almost like our need to keep them safe can limit them from being able to be set free. So it's almost like we need to work on ourselves to be able to allow them to be, adventurers and go out there and explore.
In a way of to fully explore life and be able to actually have the enthusiasm of actually what really means to actually be this playful. And one thing that I realized about kids, they are, in terms of they want to play. And if you are a parent that is always there in terms of how to keep them, that's saying it will be a problem for them in a way. And one thing that you spoke about in terms of misconceptions that they are not smart. And is one of the biggest misconceptions that it is out there because and the reason why and also the reason why that I'm saying that is the biggest is the fact that I have seen so many students that graduated that have disability, either your psychological disability or your physical disability, and it really shows that people are so again going back what I said that are so ignorant to a point in terms of they don't even want to learn about this, and they end up saying that no, they are like it. And something that I remember back then when I was younger, and I didn't understand the concept in terms of what was disability, what it really meant, how does the kid that has special needs look like. And there's this program that we had. Actually, it's not a program. It's. I think it was a company whereas it actually supported children with disabilities. It was called Life, and I always saw most of the kids. But I think most of the kids were had Down syndrome, and others had non-verbal autism called to yeah, I think it was non-verbal autism. And I always ask myself, what was that? And as I'm having this conversation, as I'm having you with you this conversation, I'm thinking that in terms of they clustered those children in one place, of not realizing that if you are able to mix those children in terms of with your normal children in terms of interaction, it builds that I would say that their social confidence, their social intelligence that they know that if I go out to the world, it won't be difficult for me to actually have a genuine conversation with other people. People will not be surprised in terms of flip. I have a disability and quality. One thing that I realized about me working here in terms of disability is the fact that the problem that we have the most is actually students disclosing their disability. Yeah, I understand it's a big thing and it's not something that is bad. Our job as individuals that actually preach the word of advocacy when it comes to disability, when it comes to mental health, is the fact that to create a safe space in terms of making them feel comfortable enough to actually talk about their disabilities and talk about the struggle they actually went through in a way. And towards my question, the build up towards my question is the fact that how has your mental well-being, how have your perspective towards mental health changed when you came to actually having a son that has special needs?
No parent wants to worry about bullying, right? Bullying is such a prevalent thing, and you think, that won't happen to my son, or you hope that won't happen to my son, but it happens, like with regular ed kids or special ed kids, they just don't, especially now that he's 11 going into middle school, that kids are not always so nice, even though they're in an environment and a school where the mission of the school is for inclusion and for acceptance and all this and that. There are still children who can be not nice. And I think that's the biggest thing right now, especially at this age, dealing with my son's perception of getting bullied. And I want him to feel that he is in a safe place. So working on his emotional well-being is very important right now. And working out, talking to his teachers. And right now he's in a YMCA day camp. So talking to the counselors about, this is what seemed to happen at camp or at school. And this is what was said from my son's point of view. Is that what happened? And is there a way for, these children to talk to each other and to relate to each other better? And I think it's not a fun time right now as far as, you want your child to be happy, and to just even imagine that they were getting bullied or are getting bullied is heartbreaking. And I think it's really important now to educate, those normal developing kids on how to be more empathetic, because I feel that children with special needs already are dealing with so much, and they have such a level, my son has such a level of empathy for others. If he sees somebody that's crying, he always wants to check up on them and see how they're doing. Or, if he sees somebody fall, he wants to check up on them. So his level of empathy is so high, I feel, that I want these normal developing kids who are supposed to be so intelligent to have the same level of empathy for him and other children as well.
And to add on that, what you said in terms of as someone that actually experienced it back in high school, it was a terrible thing, and being not able to have people that you can talk about it with, and not in a perspective of a parent, but as the perspective of a friend. Because one thing that I realized, and looking back to the fact that if I am bullied as a child, I won't actually report it to my parents, or I will actually tell my friend. And I feel like there's that kind of support that we actually need to offer children in terms of advise them. It's good to have friends. It's good to actually have that small circle of yours and tell, say things that you're feeling. And it's quite a different thing. And again, on a conversation of bullying, how do you actually educate him in a way of you spoke about counselors, and in a way of addressing those mental health problems that will be in terms of telling him that experience this and this and that. To even try to get into that.
Yeah, I think, having an open path of conversation with my son is so important. He trusts me. I'm his friend. He's 11. I'm still like one of his best friends. I am his best friend. And so he will tell me anything, and he's not as afraid to tell me anything, which is great. Right? So I try to approach, situations where he feels bullied or left out, and as much of a logical way as possible. Right? And we think about strategies that, what can you do instead? Or, did you tell your teacher about what happened? And what was the conversation that you had with them? But, right now, I think an open line of communication is so important between parents and their kids to build that trust, that he trusts me. And it is, especially with him, he kind of perseverates on an idea. There was this child at camp who was bullying him early on in the summer, and he would continue to bring that up, situations about that child up, even though supposedly that child's not bullying him anymore. But who knows if there's still ongoing stuff or not. But having to revisit his emotions about feeling bullied a week or two ago or a month ago, even 6 months ago or last year, is still an issue for us. As far as, I'm not sure if it's the same for every child, but for my son, he has an idea, and until that idea has settled and dissipated, it'll come up and create this emotional memory for him. So continually working through, it's okay that everybody's not your friend. It's okay to, walk away when someone is bullying you. It's okay to find another friend to talk to. There's other things, trying to have his focus not be on being bullied or the person who was bullying him, and try to create a different perspective on how to think more positively, right? Because I always say you can't change what happens to you, but you can change how you react to it, right? So continually having him change and redirect his negative thoughts to positive. I think that's the most important thing for him.
Quite an important thing in terms of that shift, because most of the time we actually focus on negative and not realize that also positive thoughts also exist. And before I close off, I'm seeing that we're almost out of time. And what are some things that you want to see change within the field of the school system and in a way of legislation?
So I would love for, there are so many kids with special education services for like speech therapy that may not have needed speech therapy if their parents were educated early on. So I think, there's a big need for parent education on how to work with their child with language communication, understanding, and expression. I think more parent involvement in the process of learning and development is important, because also when the child is school aged and they're going to school and getting certain services, the parent involvement is limited because the communication between the school and the therapist to the parents is often limited, right? The therapists have lots of clients on their caseload. They don't have this open line of communication with the parent often, at least in my experience being a parent. So I think by educating parents is one of the best ways that we can strengthen the process of the child to catch up on speech and language, catch up on physical needs, catch up on academics. So that's one of the biggest things. Parent advocacy and parent education is key.
And you spoke about education, and something that I actually forgot to mention before I closed up the conversation off. It's inclusion, and inclusion is something that I've seen as it's a big need, and also you can't speak about disability or special needs and without speaking about inclusion and equity. And one of the things that I have learned that are quite important, some people might say that in terms of inclusion, you might think that it's a physical thing in terms of it is wheelchair wise, in terms of the infrastructure of the building, the structure of a certain institution, a certain school. But it's more about in terms of are the children involved, are the children welcome in the school, and the teachers are patient enough to be able to actually welcome the children in terms of understand that these children, these special needs children, are coming from a certain place. So with those words, I would like to say thank you so much for